Welcome. You're listening to Newcomers, a podcast for young writers and voice actors. The following short stories were written by novice writers and may contain explicit content.
The Chandelier by Taite McKinney. Part 1. In the stillness of the night, one can still hear the shouts making serpentine patterns through cracked facade of the Château de Montclair. The once noble estate now lays decomposing in the crisp autumn air, towering over a sleeping town that has long forgotten the majesty that once accompanied the decrepit home. Children in the streets below sing tales of the horrors that are said to have taken place upon the looming hill. A boy who murdered his parents, a mad woman screaming in the night, a sister run away to avoid her beast of a sibling, and a family of glory torn to pieces. The songs splinter in the long shadow of the chateau. Children go laughing, and all the while a monster continues to roam the halls. Inside the unkept walls of the chateau, on a strewn-together bed of tattered sheets and layers of stained cloth, lays the last son of the Montclair dynasty. Hemlock Montclair erupts from his nest of trash and filth, his wild eyes stabbing in every direction. The once voluminous master bedroom, now occupied by cobwebbed reminders, stings Hemlock as he is reacquainted with his surroundings. His left eye begins to twitch as he rises from the floor and begins assembling his tools for his daily burden. The voices that echo inside his skull are vicious today. "She will never come back," says one as he attempts to swat the voice like a fly from his mangled white hair. The voices have grown worse these days, but in his time alone, he expects nothing less. One day they will stop. They will stop their onslaught, and she will return. As Hemlock meanders through the crumbling walls of his home, he hears the hisses from the dust-covered paintings on the wall, the loudest of which is of his beloved sister, Isabel. "How could you let our home fall to shambles, Hemlock? We trusted you, and you have failed the memory of this family," screams Isabel's unmoving lips. He avoids the gaze of the many paintings in the hall, once beautifully maintained, but now a haunting memento of his failures. Isabel's eyes, an electric blue, are the worst of them, and they pierce Hemlock as he scurries to the end of the hallway. The arduous journey is one he takes often in the pursuit of a grand venture. The unapproving eyes of his kin make dents in his back as he enters the foyer. The foyer of the mansion, like every other space in the chateau, is horribly neglected. Flowers, long dead, cry to be closer to the marbled floor as they droop in their chipped faces. This parlor, a once gorgeous space, is now a playground for the rats and roaches that dwell in the cracks in the walls. And in the center lays Hemlock's greatest task. Throughout his childhood, and decades prior, the Montclair home was well known for one thing and one thing alone: the gorgeous crystal chandelier that had been passed through generations. World leaders and dignitaries alike would travel miles upon miles to let their eyes feast on the light that danced off of the chandelier. But after years of neglect, the pride of the Montclair family now resides in a jagged heap in the dust and grime. Hemlock knows that the key to restoring his home and his sanity will begin with the marvelous chandelier. He begins his daily routine of polishing the crystals and tenderly examining the chandelier. The only time the voices are soft are when he is at work. This is his sign that he is doing right. After another mundane day, he retreats to his den of clutter and dust. But first, the journey through the hallway. Hemlock's pace quickens as he attempts to leave his head down to avoid the disapproving eyes of his family. The only eyes that do not strangle him are his own. For although the painting that bears his face still hangs, the eyes have long since been clawed out. The shouts that ambushed him with the most fury were once that of his own, but without eyes, his painting could no longer see his guilt. He has considered doing the same to Isabel's portrait, but his love and admiration have held him hostage. The journey through the hallway of voices grows longer every day, and Hemlock knows that he will one day overcome the overwhelming screams of the dead when his sister returns and helps him restore their former glory. As Hemlock enters his room, his first sight is of the noose in the corner. Many years before, after his family was first taken from him, he had wallowed in anguish for months. He had hung a noose in the corner and planned to end his miserable existence, but the voices had been born of that motion, leaving Hemlock screaming on the floor, unable to finish the deed. How could he reach eternal rest if he abandons their home as a coward, destroyed and broken by his own inadequacies? The voices that now torment him kept him from the end, and the noose remains as a reminder that his work is not yet complete. Sometimes he can feel the bristles of the rope coddling his throat, beginning to deliver him into serenity. But peace is no longer an option. Part 2. Hemlock's bulging eyes fly open as yet another grueling day begins. He sweeps his gaze across the cluttered room until it falls on the tattered armchair in the corner. The armchair where his father once lit a pipe and read tales of far-off adventures. Towards the end of his father's life, he no longer read, but sat in his chair as the realization of his mortality slowly ate away at his spirit. His father grew silent and cold after losing his wife, the mother of his children. Hemlock remembers his frail mother, broken by the aching in her head that led to her untimely demise. The sickness had become noticeable during Hemlock's youth. He watched as his mother withered away until she was no longer able to stand, but stayed solemnly in the room in which Hemlock now inhabited. She would speak to the people who were not there, calling the names of men and women that she had never known. Rumors of his mother's ill mind engulfed the town like wildfire, and Hemlock can remember the taunts of his schoolmates and the judging eyes of the adults in the town below. "There goes Mad Mother Monteclair," they would yell as he passed. "How long before he starts talking to the same ghosts?" he hears them whisper. Within months, his mother's cries of pain echoed through the mansion at night. How could one sleep while his nurturer screams in the next room? And just as swiftly as the sickness had arrived, it had taken her. Hemlock remembers being ushered into the room as he watched his mother, a frail and broken woman, fade into nothing. The worst part was her eyes. Towards the end, her eyes became hauntingly empty. Where a glimmer of love used to reside was now nothingness. That was long ago. Shortly after the passing of his mother, Hemlock's father had sent his beloved sister, Isabel, away. The broken man had watched his wife fade into a memory, and would not do the same with his daughter. She had been young when her mother passed, far too young to remember the monstrous symptoms of the illness that may soon be handed down to her. Hemlock longed to have his sister return. Over the years, he would ask his father if enough time had passed, and Isabel could finally return to their family home, which would only leave the man enraged, lashing out. For though the man was loving in Hemlock's youth, he now grew agitated and discontented with the life he had been given. Hemlock, as a result of his father's anger, was often left battered and beaten. Many years later, his father was gone. The cause of death could not be determined, and many claimed that the man died of a broken heart. Hemlock, now old and weary, thought little of the man. Now it was just him, left with silence and the echoing halls of a family that was no longer intact. And if he wanted to regain his past life, he must restore the chandelier. Hemlock's pace grew rapid as he maneuvered through the broken halls of his home. Emerging in the grand foyer with a great ladder, Hemlock surveyed his project. The chandelier was near complete, his hard work nearly finished. The crystals polished to perfection, the brass frame nearly returned to its former glory, and the once charred candles restored with new towers of wax. Hemlock was giddy with excitement. The voices, although terrible at night, were now a distant echo. Returning the chandelier to the ceiling would be his most challenging feat yet, but this is what must be done. He would finally have his sister back, She would hear of the chandelier once more and return to her brother, and they would restore their name. No longer a family of the deranged, but one of honor and perseverance. The voices would finally stop tormenting him, and his life would be restored. He hoisted the hulking chandelier up the ladder and climbed a great height until he was able to extend and reach the rung which used to hold the weight of the great crystal beast. A moment passed as a breath of relief flooded over him. He pulled the matches from his pocket and began lighting candles one by one. Then the voices returned, more fierce than ever. The words could not be distinguished as Hemlock stared into the crystals which had consumed many years of his life. The deafening calls of his loved ones pounded his head as he lit the candles. This was how he would be remembered. The bringer of light, the one who did not quit. The voices were wrong. This is his destiny. The pounding in his head grew ever louder as he stared at the final candle. He struck the match and lifted his arm high into the air to finally bring his work to life. But as the match meets the wick, his foot gives out. Hemlock grasps for anything to keep his balance, but to no avail. He plummets to the marble floor, a twisted mess of broken bones. He begins to feel the blood soak his coat, as his final sight is the gorgeous chandelier, throwing light off of the crystals and onto the walls. He has done it. All is silent as Hemlock drifts away from his life, and his heart stops. Part 3. Outside of the Chateau de Monteclair, a woman approaches the grand entrance. She is tall with piercing blue eyes and sleek white hair. This is a home she has not known since she was a girl. Isabel has spent many years awaiting the day when she will finally return to her childhood home and be reunited with her brother. Her eyes flicker with joy as she sees a lone light in the parlor. Taite McKinney is the technical director of Newcomers Podcast.
Thank you for listening to Newcomers. If you'd like to learn more about us, please visit us at our Instagram page at newcomers_podcast. If you'd like to submit a story or become one of our readers, email us at newcomerspodcast@gmail.com.